In the 4th century, a people appeared out of nowhere on the eastern edge of Europe, and the Romans, the mightiest empire in the world, at first believed they weren't even human. Twisted, elongated skulls, a rain of arrows from nowhere at full gallop. They called them the Scourge of God. These are the Huns, and almost everything you believe about them comes from the pen of a terrified enemy. Because the Huns didn't topple half the world because they were beasts. They did it because they were more disciplined than anyone Rome had ever met. Where did they come from? Historians still debate it. Around the 370s, the Romans get alarming news. An unknown horse people has crossed a great river and is sweeping the other tribes before it like wind scattering leaves. The Goths, themselves feared warriors, begin to flee with their whole nation, straight into the Roman Empire. And here's a chilling detail. The skulls of some of the Huns were literally deformed, elongated, stretched upward, not from disease. Deliberately, their heads reshaped in infancy with soft bindings. It was a status symbol. Imagine the terror of a Roman soldier facing such an inhuman-seeming face on the battlefield for the first time. To understand them, you need to know one thing. Their whole life revolved around the horse. A Hun boy learned to ride before he could walk. They ate, slept, and negotiated in the saddle. The horse wasn't transport, it was an extension of their body. Their weapon was an engineering marvel. The composite bow, with which they aimed accurately even at full gallop, turned backward. Their favorite trick was the feigned retreat. They'd pretend to flee, the enemy would chase in broken ranks, and then, turning in the saddle, they'd mow them down. An army that was most dangerous precisely when it seemed to be losing. And here's the first twist. Maybe you know the story. The Huns were so savage, they put raw meat under the saddle, tenderized it, and ate it. A perfect image of a beastly people, except it's almost certainly not true. It was recorded by a Roman writer who hated them and misunderstood or deliberately exaggerated something. The meat under the saddle most likely protected the horse's sores. The Huns actually cooked and lived on dairy, on mare's milk. Do you see what's happening? We don't know the Huns. We know what their terrified enemies wrote to prove these weren't real people. And now, the moment that turns it all upside down. Attila didn't rise to the top alone. At first he ruled together with his brother Bleda, whom he then, for power, most likely had killed. In 448, a Roman diplomat named Priscus attended a banquet at the court of Attila, the dreaded Hun king, and what he saw was not a raving savage. The guests were served lavish food on silver platters, from gold cups, but Attila himself ate from a plain wooden plate, only meat, and drank from a wooden cup. His clothing was unadorned, standing out only for its cleanliness. His sword and his horse's bridle had no gold, while his nobles glittered with jewelry. Think what a message that is. One of the most feared men in the world showed his power not through display, but through severe simplicity, proving by exactly that he stood above them. This is not a mindless barbarian. This is a coldly calculating leader. And Rome? In the end, it didn't try to defeat him. It tried to pay him off, sending Attila enormous amounts of gold every year just so he wouldn't attack. The most powerful empire in the world paid tribute to a man who ate off a wooden plate. It seemed nothing could stop him. And here's the second big twist. The man who made all of Europe tremble wasn't killed by a hero, not by a battle. In 453, Attila took a new, young wife. On his wedding night, he was found dead in bed. By all signs, it was a simple nosebleed, but he'd fallen asleep drunk, on his back, and drowned in his own blood. The most powerful warrior in the world didn't die sword in hand. He died drunk, of a nosebleed, and what came after was even more stunning. His sons turned on each other for power, his subjects rose up, and in a single battle, they crushed the Huns. The empire one man had held together vanished almost the moment he did. A generation later, the Huns had essentially disappeared from history. The Huns weren't fearsome because they were animals. They were fearsome because they came from a completely different world, and Rome didn't know what to do with them. That's why they called them monsters. Not for what they did, but because they didn't fit Rome's view of the world. It was easier to call them the Scourge of God than to admit the great empire had been knocked off balance by an opponent more skilled than itself. History is written by the victors, but sometimes by the terrified losers too. And when a strong empire fears someone, it carves a monster out of them, so it doesn't have to face its own weakness. The question: how many other barbarian peoples in history do we only know through what their terrified enemies wrote? Tell me in the comments what surprised you the most.